Hi, Gabby. How are you?
I'm okay. Let me start. Okay, I just want to say to add to what Hedy said already, because we had a little chat just before the session, and you mentioned how you look forward to this discussion, to this session, because the topic is so interesting, and it really is interesting. Um, it's interesting for many reasons, and one of the reasons is the fact that it's never discussed.
Hmm.
I mean, how many times have you actually um, discussed the differences between teaching adults and teaching young learners with your colleagues? I mean, I sometimes I feel that teachers like to think of themselves as either or. So I'm either a teacher of English to adults, or I'm a teacher of English to young learners. And we both know, and Hedy knows, that it's not the case. If you are lucky, or maybe unlucky, then you only get to teach, say, one age group, so say adults or young learners. But the reality very often is that we have to teach both. We have to teach young learners, we have to teach adults, and it's all fine. But when you get a half an hour notice that you have to go from an adult class to a junior class, um, it could be, I mean, I still remember how I felt, say 20 something years ago when I was a starting, new teacher, and I was asked to teach young learners like 20 minutes after I finished my lesson with adults. And it was absolutely paralyzing. I mean, if you are, when you have this experience, you are an experienced teacher, you have been teaching for some time, then you kind of feel better about, having to teach both. But if you are a teacher with little experience, the feeling can be absolutely paralyzing. So I'm so happy that you wanted to talk about this area of teaching, because we really need it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I had the same feeling as well. I mean, I remember when I was asked to teach, it's exactly as you say, going from adults to juniors, but also to going from juniors to adults. For me, it was, at the beginning of my career, it was terrifying, absolutely. And I didn't really have a handle on exactly, how I could do it. And I've been like I've been teaching for decades now. And so you do start to get used to, you do start to sort of think about, make it more sort of active, in your thinking process about what, how can I approach this class and how can I approach that class. And it was probably about maybe 10 years ago or so, I came across transactional analysis.
Mhm.
And I thought, I wonder if that would work for me in the classroom, putting myself in a different sort of, in a different pair of shoes, I suppose. Would that work for me? Would that let me almost sort of change approach a little bit, change a persona, etc.? Would that let me kind of reach out to my adult or my junior learners a little bit better, make it a little bit more authentic? And I tried it, because I tried it in various other situations as well. And I tried it and I thought, okay, well, I'm actively seeing that now I'm going to be the positive adult, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to see what kind of difference that makes. But you're right. I mean, until that point, and as I said, I'd been teaching for 10 years plus, to be honest. Don't want to give away too much of my age or my info there. But I've been teaching for a while at that point, and nobody had discussed it. And I've had colleagues from all over, from well, the UK, the US, Canada, everywhere. We've all had colleagues from everywhere, and nobody ever mentions it. Nobody ever says, how did that go? Did you find that challenging? Did you find that difficult, just coming out of a junior class or just coming out of an adult class? We are expected to be either just a junior teacher, just an adult teacher, just a teen teacher is another one. But I think that in reality, we well, as we've said here, it could be, it's any given day, isn't it, that you could be asked to either step in to do somebody else's class, or you've got a new class and that's been given to you. So, you know, it's, for me, transactional analysis is a really important tool that allows us as teachers to be mentally flexible, to say, okay, I can jump about and be happy and play games and think about, you know, I don't know, TPR or whatever. I can do that. And then equally, I can just walk into a business English class, no problem. It's fine. And now that I've, you know, used transactional analysis in that context, I find, well, it works for me. It absolutely works for me. I'm able to do it now.
Okay, can I ask you a question? I wanted to ask you this question much later, but since you are already discussing it, I think it's the best moment. Okay. So this transactional analysis and this swap, you know, the swapping the mindset, you know, this transactional analysis may, maybe it's just my feeling, but I think that many teachers may still find it a little bit abstract. So my question to you is, what exactly happens? What exactly do you do? Because I assume you don't meditate, right? So this change, this swap of the mindset doesn't happen during a meditation session. No. So what exactly do you do without calling it a transactional analysis? What is it that you do when you leave one room and you go to another room and you have a totally different audience in terms of age?
Well, that is an excellent question, because you're right, it is completely abstract, and it's an abstract concept. And so I think anybody who comes across it for the first time, I mean, they are going to be a little bit kind of, you know, maybe a little bit confused, or, as you say, find it a little bit abstract. But basically what happens with transactional analysis is, when you become familiar with the attributes of the parent, adult and child, when you become familiar with those attributes, you can see them and identify them in yourself. So I gave some examples in the presentation talking about the adult is a nurturer, a caregiver, encouraging, gives support, you know, wants the best for everybody around them, you know, like a positive parent would. And when you start to understand what these attributes are, you look at yourself and you say, well, actually, yeah, I do have, maybe not all the time, but I do have those attributes. But the most important thing is I can identify those attributes within myself. So when you look at that and you look at the parent, and then you look at the adult, and then you look at the child, and you identify all the attributes within each of these different roles, what we can do is we can say, okay, at this point, we can become aware of how we're behaving. So it is about mindset, yes, but it's also about our behavior. So if, for example, if I'm with my family, if I'm with my brother, particularly, because my brother's older than me. So if I'm with my brother, my mindset changes into being a lot more playful and a lot more open to, nothing is serious, nothing is a serious conversation. So when I'm with him, he has that kind of effect on me that we like to laugh and we like to, you know, joke and that sort of thing. And that comes from, you know, growing up and being that child and knowing my brother in that context. So again, when I'm looking at transactional analysis, I think about what are the attributes that children have, and I can identify them within myself even today. So that's really the key to how to use it, to think about what are the attributes. You know, there's lots of attributes, but be able to actually identify them and put yourself in those shoes. And the problem, well, not the problem, but the reality of this, Gabby, is that it's not passive. It's not something you can just say, oh yeah, I know about that, I've heard about that, it'll work for me. You really have to work at it. You have to say, okay, right now I am being a positive adult. So for example, right now I'm talking to you, I am being a positive adult. When we spoke earlier on, we were doing a little bit of giggling, and there was a dog that barked, and I was like, oh, the dog. That's me being a positive child. Yeah, because we're enjoying ourselves, it's fun. But right now we're talking about something that's, you know, quite serious. So we're having a positive adult to adult conversation. when we can identify our behavior in those points, because all of our behavior, all of our mindset comes from within, comes from who we are. When we can identify them, we can start to manipulate them, and we can switch them on and switch them off. Does that make sense?
Yes, but that makes me think that perhaps this may be difficult for some people to achieve. And perhaps this is the reason why some teachers like to think that they are just not cut, not suited to teach young learners, because they may find it very difficult to switch the mindset to teaching young learners, because as you said, it means it's your personality in a sense, right? So the mindset is your personality. And if it's not in your personality, then it may be extremely hard, right?
Yeah.
So let me just ask you another question then, because
Sure.
obviously this is the mindset and our personality. Some of us may find it more difficult to change this mindset, right? So if you are naturally a very serious person and very academic and naturally very analytical, you may find it very difficult to actually suddenly find a child, in your personality. So, but we know, we both know that it's not just the mindset. The mindset is very, very, very important. It's extremely important, and teachers should be talking about it and thinking about it. But it's not just the mindset, it's also the practicalities. So, for example, if I am this serious type, the teacher who's always serious, and I find it very difficult to interact with kids, then in terms of the practicalities, how could we help teachers who will find it more difficult to work with mindset, and they just need to focus on really practical things, kind of relating to lesson planning and activities, and or let me just rephrase this, okay? Someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, a very experienced teacher trainer said to me, Gabby, teaching young learners is tricky because there is really very little teaching, and 90% of the lesson is classroom management. How do you feel about this? How would you relate to this statement?
From my experience, there's more teaching than there is classroom management, honestly speaking. However, I think, of course, every teacher is different, and of course, every class is different. But for me, I think that if you've got young learners, there's certain, if you like, behaviours or attitudes that you would come to expect from young learners. So, while you can have a sort of maybe like an 80-20 split teaching classroom management with adults, you wouldn't expect that with young learners. But at the same time, you would incorporate that into your class. So if your classroom management is about trying to sort of maintain the energy and trying to maintain the bubbling over or whatever, so you can exploit that. You can use that to your own advantage by creating lots of activities that take advantage of the fact that there is all this enthusiasm, and there is the need to chat and the need to move around, and all that kind of thing. That's how I do it. And so I don't see these issues, for want of a better expression, as something I have to manage. It's just something that I incorporate into the lesson, if that makes sense.
Okay, so just to kind of follow up on what you said and the initial question. So, because in your presentation, in your video, you also said that adults and young learners explore things differently, and I really like how you put it, because that's exactly how it is. That the way adults and young learners explore things obviously affects the way they learn. And we know that adults and young learners learn in a different way. So because they learn in a different way, then the content we teach is also different, right?
Yeah.
So I may be wrong, but I feel that, say, with young learners, the language that we teach, we kind of sneak it in by kind of teaching skills. So we don't teach language explicitly, because as you said, young learners are driven by curiosity and they are motivated by curiosity, right?
Yeah.
But they lack the ability to actually think about the language. So young learners can't think about language as opposed to adults. They are driven by curiosity, okay? So I've seen many teachers trying to explain and over-explain grammar or vocabulary to young learners. So again, my question now is, what would you say to newly qualified teachers in terms of advising them how to prepare their lessons and what to teach? What content do we actually teach to young learners, and what do we teach to adults, and how to get ready for this change from, you know, an adult group to young learners group? How do we teach? What do we teach?
Again, from my experience, I teach more concrete subjects and concrete topics with my young learners. So I will teach while we are, while we're playing a game, which is tangible, which is, they can get involved in, and I can say, okay, pick up the die, or I can say, where's your counter? Or you have to move 3 steps, and I'll show them 1, 2, 3, something like that. I will show them something that they can be themselves involved in, so they can, as I said, the tangible learning. With adults, I tend to move away from tangible learning, and I go to intangible. So I talk about concepts, and I talk about, altered realities in a what if scenario. The problem with, well, not the problem, the thing that we as teachers have to remember about grammar is that it is, first of all, I love grammar. Somebody one time said to me, just when you said, total grammar geek over here, love it, it's the best thing ever. However, somebody one time said to me, oh yes, you're a grammar teacher. So rather than being a young learners or an adult teacher, I was put in the box of being a grammar teacher, because I was the kind of go-to person as far as grammar was concerned. Which is absolutely fine. And grammar, of course, has its place. However, when we are speaking the language, and when we're in our class, when we're talking to young learners, over explaining and over defining, this is the past simple, this is the present perfect, and one's an experience, one's a past action. When we're doing that, we lose our students. And if we're trying to teach them something that is useful for them outside the classroom, and if we're trying to teach them something that will make them an independent learner and an independent user of the language, we have to step away from that. Because what we want to do, yes, of course, we want to have the foundation and the support and, the scaffolding of the grammar around. Of course, we want to be using the grammar. We want to hear them using the grammar, producing it as we go through the lessons. But really, when we are talking to them, when we are interacting with them, when they're interacting with each other, we really want to be promoting the use of the language, because that's why they're there. It's a very unusual situation. And please, Gabby, correct me if I'm wrong, if this has ever happened to you. You've been sitting around a table in a restaurant meeting new friends or old friends, and someone says, actually, could you explain the present perfect to me? I never really understood that. It's not a thing that happens, but people like to talk, people like to communicate, and people like to use the language. And so that's what I do when I'm teaching young learners. I will teach tangible, concrete topics, and I will use the grammar, and I will repeat the same phrases as well. I will have stock phrases that I use, like, is everybody okay when they come in? Is everybody happy today? So they hear and they learn and they repeat and they understand, and it's predictable what I'm going to say, so that they can feel safe. But with the adults, I challenge them and I push them, and I talk about concepts like, voting rights in, Peru, Why not? And I talk to them about things that they maybe don't know too much about, because what we have to then do is we have to go and research. So as they're reading and as they're listening and as then they're writing and speaking, they're practicing all the skills and they're practicing the grammar too, but that's not the focus of the lesson. What the focus of the lesson is an intangible concept. That's how I work it.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, it always amazes me when teachers talk about teaching young learners and kind of teaching, yes, the present simple, the present perfect, or I don't know, adverbs, adjectives. And then, you know, I often feel that we sometimes kind of teach them the language that they don't even have in their L1 yet, not conceptually. So obviously they are the speakers of their L1. They speak the language, they use the different tenses, but they don't know what tenses they're using because they don't analyze it. So when they come to an English class and say the English teacher starts by saying, okay, this is the present continuous, this is the present simple, you do it when, and you use this when, and you use this when, or if. And then, you know, it's almost like they learn the concept in L2 and not L1. So they are not ready for the conceptual teaching and learning of grammar.
Yeah.
So it's really based on drilling and functions and phrases and the use of it, as opposed to when we use it. Yeah. So it's the doing and yes, and the using of the language, but not talking about it. And it's a very, very it's a common trap that many teachers fall into when they swap from adult, you know, teaching adult classes to teaching young learners. Many teachers can't really see this difference, that explanations don't necessarily work with young learners.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think a lot of that is to do exactly as you say, is with the concept. When I would like to take you back to language learning when I was at school a few years back, honest. And what I would like to ask if there's anybody in the chat who went to school in the UK. And maybe you'll be able to back me up on this or not, but certainly in Scotland, when we were at school, primary school, and then we went into secondary school, we were not taught grammar. We knew nothing about grammar. So we knew what a noun is, what a verb is, an adjective, and that was kind of it, really. And then when I went out to teach, that was the first thing I had to do, was learn English. I had to learn English grammar because I was being asked questions about the present simple or the past simple or whatever, and I had no idea what I was talking about. So going back into my experience at high school, I was being taught French and I had no reference point. So people were saying to me, okay, well, my French teacher was saying to me, okay, so this is the present simple, this is the past simple, this is the whatever. And I had no reference point because I didn't know what that was in English. And I wasn't alone. There were many, many people like that. And I know for a fact today, if I talk to people who are not in the English teaching world, and sometimes, because as I said to you before, I love grammar, so sometimes I do talk to people about grammar, and I find that it's quite normal for people, certainly in Scotland, and I think across the UK, of my age group, not to have that grasp on grammar. So if I were to go into if you were to teach me a second language at this point, and you were talking to me about grammar, I would understand because of what I do. But I wouldn't if I did something else. If I was, I don't know, a doctor or a lawyer or something else, or I taught a different subject, then I might not have that same grasp. So when we go in and we're talking to our young learners, we can't expect that they would, first of all, process the same way that we can process. So when somebody gives us an explanation, we can say, yeah, okay, I can understand that. That goes there, this goes there, this is how it works, this is what it looks like. I can understand that. Can a child do that? Can a young learner do that? And that's really what we have to think about. So that's why we have, when you think about how any child learns their first language, what do? They listen and they repeat and they make mistakes and they repeat again and they have building blocks, sometimes literally, of words and letters. And that's how they build it up. You don't ever see a mother or a father or a caregiver sitting, you know, in a, I don't know, in a cafe or a restaurant explaining out grammar to their children. That just doesn't, I've literally never seen that once in my life. So, you know, that's not something that happens. That's not something that happens a lot, because children, young learners, take on through, as we've already said, through curiosity, but also this idea of the sort of the tangible. They've been able to touch and move the building blocks around and move the car back and forward. What color is the car? The car is green, you know, that sort of thing. So
yes, so I think that this is one of the most important things when you are a teacher and you are having to teach young learners and adults. You kind of need to bear it in mind that the process of learning is completely different, very different, and it affects the content that you will be teaching. So there was someone in the chat box who made a comment about the importance of grammar, and and I don't know if who was that, Saimir? And I wonder if Saimir would like to tell us more about it. The most important thing is grammar in an adult class or in a young learners class. Okay. No, Saimir? That's okay. I was just very, because this comment was put in the chat box some time ago, and I even made a note of it because it's very interesting. So I just wonder if it's young learners or adults, because I would find it very, very interesting, if not strange, if this was the case, you know, of young learners asking for more grammar, because this has never ever happened to me, never in my life. No adults, no adults or no adults.
I'm reading that as no adults.
Oh, okay, so adults. Okay, no adults. Oh yeah, okay. Well, this is exactly what we have been discussing, right? So adults are ready to analyze language, and they want to analyze language. At least most of them, not all of them, but most. My adult students want to analyze the language they learn. They want to understand the principles behind. They want to understand the concept and then compare it to the concept in their own languages. So this is how adults they think they are able to analyze it. How do you mean? Would you like to? Adults think they can't analyze it. I think they can. I think they that's what, and as teachers, that's what we help them do. They can only analyze language with our help, I think. So yeah, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with you, Gabby. I think that's probably true.
Okay. Oh, okay. So I think what you're talking about is, okay, learners, we all know them. Learners who only want to do controlled practice. So they just want to do gap fills and focus on grammar and accuracy. This actually takes me to my next question. It's about what you mentioned in the video. It's about language barriers. Okay, and I really liked this point, because that's another major difference between young learners and adults. It's a huge difference. Language barriers, you can hardly ever see any examples of language barriers in a young learners class. It just doesn't happen. Juniors don't have any barriers. They just want to communicate. And with adults, it is a big problem. And very often it's the frustration as well. I mean, most adults who, at least in my class, who want to learn English are professional people who are outspoken, you know, articulate and in their L1. And then it's very frustrating for them to actually express themselves in L2. And it almost feels like, you know, they are silly because they can't speak. So, I mean, this is how they feel, not the teacher. But
Sure.
so what I'm trying to say is that because of the language, because of this, students very often are fixated on the grammar. They don't want to practice because of the fear of making mistakes. So this is a great point again. So if you say teach young learners and then you have a lot of experience teaching young learners, and then one day you are asked to teach adults, this is something that you need to bear in mind, right? That adults are different. They have language barriers. They will be afraid of making mistakes and risk taking.
Absolutely. I think that's true. And I think that, you know, anybody who's taught adults will have seen somewhere along the line, they will have seen some kind of barrier there. And sometimes it's things like, you know, I'm too old to learn, or, you know, I don't have enough time because I've got a job and I've got a family. And absolutely, you can understand that, of course. However, what we have to do is we have to make sure that we as teachers, we understand that these barriers do exist. Now, when we go into a class, you know, we can't say, okay, hands up everyone who's got a language barrier. We can't do that, obviously. And quite often people don't know they have them, you know. I mean, I have seen myself in language classes, and I was absolutely terrified. I went into an Italian language class, and that was after I lived in Italy for 10 years. And I remember, so I came back to Scotland and I thought, well, I want to keep my language going. So I went to this evening class, and I was absolutely terrified that everybody in the class would laugh at me, would laugh at my accent, you know, I would sound silly, I would sound terrible. And I sat there, and when the class started and the teacher introduced herself and everybody started talking, we were all in the same boat. However, I almost didn't walk into that room, Gabby. I'll be honest with you. I almost didn't go in. And at that point in my life, as I said, I lived there for 10 years. So, you know, my Italian was pretty okay. But I had all these barriers, because we as adults, we have these barriers. We don't want people to laugh at us. We don't want to fall over in the street. We don't want somebody to say, you know, something rude to us, or something we take as the wrong way, or something like that. So all of these are limiting beliefs, and they're all limiting for the activities and the experiences that we can have as adults. So in the language classroom, it's exactly the same. Of course, it's exactly the same. So we as teachers, we have to understand that. Now, when we go in to a new class, or any class, doesn't have to be a new class, but when we go into a class and we say, you know, we think to ourselves, okay, I am aware that the adults have barriers. What can I do to help? What can I do to try and get over these barriers? Now, our language learners may or may not know they're there. They may or may not admit that they're there. None of that is important. What we have to do is we have to say, okay, from a teacher's point of view, how can I make this better? How can I work with this? So if you were my student, Gabby, okay, let's think about how we would talk about using the mindset, okay? And say you're learning English, this is day one of our class, etc., and I'm going in trying to think about how you might have barriers, and how you want to be treated, and how we should behave in this class. If I go in thinking, okay, I'm going to take in some kind of running dictation, for example. We're all running around the classroom and we're all going, you know, Tig, you're that, you're this, you're the next thing. We're having some sort of high energy. Or if I go into the classroom with an activity that is more supported than that, and is more comfortable than that, and perhaps is more accessible. So maybe maybe it's more about your experience so far, like what you've been doing in life, what your job is, what your activities, your hobbies, something like that. How would you feel in both of those situations? If you go into that new classroom and you've already got the feeling, for example, that I had when I went into that Italian room, if then I had to then afterwards run about and put things on the wall and say, Tig, you're it, it's maybe going to be overwhelming for me. But if I go into the classroom and the content is more designed to be concrete for an adult, then I'm maybe going to start to feel more comfortable. I don't know. My question to you, if I may, is how would you feel?
How would I feel if you came to my class as a teacher and you started the lesson with a running dictation activity, you mean?
Yep.
Um, you see, it's kind of, for me, it's hard to say, because I can't at the moment. It's very difficult for me to kind of drop this teacher perspective. I've been teaching for too long, you see. But I think that, and you see, I wouldn't mind that, but I would definitely expect the teacher to help me analyze, because I like to analyze,
Mhm.
and I like, concepts. I like conceptual. I need to understand things conceptually. And sorry, I was saying, yeah. So I would expect the teacher to. Well, a little bit of fun is okay, but I really expect the teacher to to help me understand the language. So not so you see, the way we teach young learners by drilling and phrases and functions, it's all cool, okay? But for me, it wouldn't work as an adult learner, because I need to understand what I'm repeating, and I need to understand what I'm saying, and I need to understand the principles behind it. So I guess yeah, I guess I'm a typical adult learner, right? I
Thank
like to
you.
think.
Yeah. Well, when you talked about you want to analyze it, and I think in the presentation I said that adults like to solve problems, which is that, isn't it? It's the same as, analyzing something, breaking it down like a mechanic would, and then sorting it all out and then put it back on. And I think you're right. And as an adult learner, I'm the same. I am absolutely the same
Yeah,
type of learner.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, again, this is something that teachers, in particular, new teachers, should kind of remember, that it's very important how young learners learn and how adults learn, and this element of grammar as well. How we sell grammar to adult learners and how we sell it to young learners is different. I'd like to ask you something about motivation, because that was how you started your video. And it was the first 2 minutes, I think, of the video, and then you made a point of young learners being motivated intrinsically. And then I immediately thought, what, Suzanne, are you sure this is what you want to say? Because who came to mind was my niece.
Okay.
And she's 16 at the moment, but she's always been motivated extrinsically. Extrinsically, this is the word, yeah, yes. So I kind of feel that it's that young learners are actually not motivated intrinsically, because it's adult learners. Young learners are most certainly motivated by curiosity. I absolutely agree with this. But then what happens if the curiosity is in the wrong place? I mean, if my niece could be here, she would tell you, she would give you 20 reasons why whatever she has to study at school is completely useless. Okay, in the 21st century, what she's taught, it's totally useless. So she is driven by curiosity, but the curiosity lies kind of elsewhere. So so Yeah, so the point I'm kind of trying to make is that young learners may have this natural curiosity, but they also don't really think, there is no why we are learning. With adults, this is the first point. Every single adult knows the why. They come to your class and they know why they are in your class. Therefore, students may have different needs because the whys are different. People learn the language for different reasons. With young learners, um, it's not necessarily, they are motivated extrinsically, I think, very often because they have to, and parents promise, you know, whatever they promise if they study. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it. And then the question is, how do you motivate young learners? Because with adults, it's easier. They motivate themselves. But what do you do with young learners?
I think that what's really interesting is that you talked about your niece who's 16. She is, I mean, which teenager has not said that everything I'm learning at school is a waste of time and it's, you know, it's not for me. And I said that, I'm sure you said that, I'm sure Hedy said that, we all said that. So that's perfectly normal. However, what is interesting there is that she's learning something, and that will be intrinsic. Now, when I said that young learners are intrinsically motivated, I can't guarantee you what they're going to learn. Now, they may or may not learn English or maths or biology. They'll probably learn TikTok, though. They'll probably learn how to use Instagram, and they'll learn various other things. So that's where the intrinsic learning comes from. They are driven by curiosity. They're driven by keeping up with their friends. They want to be, you know, they want to know what's happening around. Absolutely. So that's where the intrinsic motivations come from. If on top of that you want them to learn English, or you want them to learn French or Spanish or something like that, then that is when it becomes extrinsic, because you're asking them to do that. Not you personally, but you know what I mean. An outside sort of person is asking them to do that, a parent or an aunt in your case, or whoever. But and with adults, the difference with adults is that they can be intrinsically motivated as well, and they can be extrinsically motivated, but they have a choice. So they're active learners. And they, I mean, of course, they have consequences if they don't learn something. If they don't want to learn English, then fine, don't learn English. You'll never speak English. That's okay. That's your choice. That's fine. But with younger learners, when we're talking about their motivation, we've got to understand that when we learn things, we do it for one, actually, it's not just learning, it's any kind of motivation. We do it for one of two reasons. So you do something either to get a reward, so to do something well, or you do something to avoid a problem. And that's why we do basically anything. This is a theory from Gustave Le Bon in 1875, don't you know? Anyway, so Gustave Le Bon, very interesting man, he had this theory that anything that we're motivated to do is either towards a goal or away from a problem. So if you think about, for example, I set my alarm clock this morning at 6 o'clock. That is not my natural, that's not my intrinsic, that's not what I want to do. So I want to stay in my bed until at least 9:30, have a bagel, cuddle the dog, you know, the usual, but I can't do that. Why can't I do that? Why am I motivated to do that? So I'm motivated to do that because I don't want to be late for work, which is the problem. So I'm avoiding the problem. The other side of that is the reward, is that I have a good reputation for being on time, for example. So when we're looking at our students and we're talking about motivating them, we have to think about the individual. What can they gain from this class? Now, I don't know your niece, obviously, so I don't know what her interests specifically would be. But if you think about what she is learning and what she is doing, what can she gain from that? Now, I can tell you about my niece, for example. Her latest thing to learn is the bass guitar. And she is, you know, she's very good, I must say. And the reason that she wants to do that is because her friends have a band and she wants to be part of the band. So that's her intrinsic motivation. She's not maybe naturally curious about a bass guitar, but her motivation is driving her towards this outcome, this reward, which is being part of the band. Now, obviously that takes her away from learning in her case, not English, but German is the second language that she's learning. That takes her away from that. So how, as a school or as a teacher, can you shift that focus from what is intrinsically curiosity, playing the bass guitar, or I don't know, learning about social media or whatever? How do you make that shift onto language learning? And once we've done that, I think we've cracked it with our young learners.
Yeah, I mean, because you see, the reason why I asked you about this was to kind of help, again, new teachers or teachers who have to teach both, age
Sure.
range, how to prepare them for what will happen in an adult class and what will happen in a young learners class. So, because again, I mean, the reality, in particular with teenagers, we have all been through this. Sometimes it's very difficult to find a class that is less motivated than a class of 16 teenagers. So, this is why I asked about motivation, because we can talk as much as we want about motivation, but whether people or students are motivated this way or another, but then the reality is you go into an adult class and you have a group of people who know exactly why they are there. Most of them know exactly why. So you don't even, your role as a teacher doesn't even have to be to motivate them, because they already come fully motivated. And then you finish your lesson with adults and you go into another room and there are 15 young learners, say 13 to 15-year-olds. And this bunch is not motivated. So you may have to kind of deal with this as a teacher. So you see, I'm just trying to sensitize teachers to the fact that the way the two groups are motivated is also very, very, very different. So then, I don't know. What do we do to motivate a group of unmotivated or demotivated teenagers who just couldn't care less about studying? They just want the lesson to be over.
I think we have to ask ourselves first and foremost, what do they care about? Because they care about something. So what is it that they care about? And whether that's something quite easy, like a context change, like football, for example. Personally, I'm not motivated by football. I know nothing about football. But when I was in Italy, I did a lot of lessons around football because that's what my students were interested in. And that's where I could embrace their energies and I could embrace their enthusiasm because they were talking about something that was interesting. The other thing, it might not even be a subject or a context issue that would motivate them. Maybe it's a physical element that would motivate them. For example, in my summer school, what we do is when it's a nice day, we take them outside of the classroom. And we do various different types of lots and lots of different types of activities, but we do them outside because it breaks down those walls, if you like, and lets them be who they are, be free. So I think that there's lots of different ways of motivating. That's two ways that I've done it in the past. But I think also it does depend on the individual, how we can motivate them. But I think you're absolutely right. When we're talking about new teachers, there is a completely different atmosphere in, an adult group or a business English group to going into a young learners group. And, whether they're young learners or whether they're teenagers, slightly at the other end of the scale of young learners, it doesn't matter, because if they're not motivated, then you're going to have a tough job. So as a teacher, what are your motivational tools? I suppose that's what we have to think about. For me, it's context is one, and content at that point as well, but also what can we do physically? Can we do we have to stand up? Can we go outside the classroom? Can we move about? Another thing I used to do a lot with a teacher who had the classroom next to me, this was maybe, 15 years ago, Gabby, something like that we would just put our classes together. So, we would actually just make one big lesson, and as a result everybody was interacting and everybody was sort of talking to each other and what have you. So I think there's various ways of motivation, but I think what we should never assume that is that everybody in the class is there, A, for the same reason, and B, with the same level of motivation, because I think that would be naive of us as teachers.
I have so many more questions, but I just checked the time because I can see Hetty's getting fidgety and a bit restless, and this is always telling. So yeah, Hetty is effectively giving me signs. Yes, yes, I can see you, Hetty. So yeah, I'm afraid we will have to wrap it up now. So Hetty,
Okay.
back to you. Thank you, Suzanne. This was
Thank
really
you, Gabby.
interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you.